"We are finally wrapping up this ridiculous charade," my son Preston announced in the middle of the courtroom, wearing a smile I had never seen before. It was a cold, calculated, victorious smile. My daughter-in-law, Courtney, nodded beside him, looking satisfied, as if they had just won the Powerball lottery. I sat in silence, my hands trembling in my lap, feeling the floor opening up beneath my feet. 66 years of life, 42 years of marriage, 5 years of widowhood, and it all came down to this: sitting in a bankruptcy court, being humiliated by my own flesh and blood. Judge Miller looked up from the documents, furrowed his brow, and suddenly his expression changed completely. "Wait a minute," he said slowly, staring intently at me. "This is the company that just inked the $75 million defense contract with the Department of Defense?" A deathly silence fell over the room. "I need to see these documents again." I watched the smile freeze on Preston's face. I watched Courtney go pale. And for the first time in 6 months of this living nightmare, I felt that maybe, just maybe, the truth was about to come to light. If you have ever felt betrayed by your own family, if you have ever worked yourself to the bone only for someone to try and snatch away everything you built, then you are going to understand every word of what I am about to tell you. Because this is not just the story of how I almost lost my company. It is the story of how I discovered that the son I raised, the boy I gave everything to, was capable of destroying me out of pure greed, and how justice, when I least expected it, arrived in the most unexpected way. But to understand how I ended up in that courtroom, with my son trying to have me declared incompetent and strip me of the only thing I had left of my husband Arthur, I need to take you back 5 years, to the day everything changed, to the day I was left completely alone. Arthur died on a Tuesday afternoon, a massive coronary, while he was reviewing blueprints for a new aerospace part in his workshop. There was no time for goodbyes, no last words. Just the phone ringing and the paramedic's voice telling me to get to the hospital as fast as I could. When I arrived, it was too late. My life partner, my business partner, my best friend, was gone. And I, Eleanor, was left alone with a small manufacturing company that everyone considered a dead-end garage business. Preston arrived at the funeral in a suit that cost more than 3 months of my salary. Courtney wore a black designer dress and heels that clicked loudly on the church floor. They did not cry. They did not even pretend to do it well. During the wake, I heard them talking in the hallway. "Now that Dad is gone, Mom is going to have to sell the plant," Preston said. "It is the only sensible thing to do. A woman her age cannot handle a business." Courtney laughed. "We can finally convince her. That place is worth more as real estate than as a company." I felt something break inside me. I was not just burying my husband. I was discovering that my son was already planning to bury our legacy too. That night, alone in the house we had built together, I made a decision. Arthur had dedicated 38 years of his life to that company. We had started in our garage, machining simple parts, dreaming of something bigger. Little by little, with sacrifice and grit, we became specialized suppliers of aerospace components. Small, yes, but with an impeccable reputation for precision and quality. I was not going to let all that die with him. I was not going to give Preston the satisfaction of seeing me quit. The next morning, I arrived at the factory at 5 o'clock. I put on the coveralls Arthur had given me years ago, tied my hair back, and walked onto the shop floor. The employees looked at me with a mix of surprise and respect. "Mrs. Vance," said Mike, our production supervisor for the last 15 years, "you do not have to be here. We can handle everything for now." I smiled at him, though I felt like I was crumbling inside. "Mike, this company is the only thing I have left of Arthur. If I am not here, where else am I going to be?" And so began my new life. 12 hours a day at the plant, 14 when there were urgent orders. I learned to read the contracts Arthur used to handle. I learned to negotiate with suppliers who looked at me with condescension. I learned to make tough calls, to fire people when necessary, to fight for every client, for every contract. It was not easy. There were nights I cried from exhaustion, wondering if Preston was right, if I was too old, too naive, too stubborn for this. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered Arthur's hands over mine, teaching me to read technical blueprints. I remembered his voice saying, "Eleanor, you are stronger than you think. You always have been. and I kept going. What I did not know was that while I was fighting to keep our company alive, my own son was weaving a web to destroy me. Arthur and I met when I was just 19. He was working as a technician at a small tool and die shop, and I was a secretary at the same company. It was not love at first sight. It was something better. It was recognition. As if our souls had been looking for each other for years and finally met. We got married 6 months later, against the advice of my family, who said we were too young, too dreamy, too poor. They were right about one thing. We were dreamers. Arthur dreamed of building something of his own, something he could leave as a legacy. I dreamed of a family, of a home filled with love and laughter. For 3 years, we saved every penny. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, ate rice and beans 4 times a week, and had no TV or car. But we had a shared dream, and that was worth more than any comfort. When Preston, our only son, was born, I felt my life was complete. He was a beautiful baby, with Arthur's dark eyes and my small nose. We took care of him between the two of us. Arthur worked the morning shift. I worked the evening shift, so there was always someone with the baby. We could not afford a babysitter. We could not afford many things. But Preston never knew what it was to be hungry or cold. We made sure of that. 2 years after Preston was born, Arthur came home with eyes shining with excitement. He had found a small workshop for rent, almost abandoned, in an industrial park. "It is perfect, Eleanor," he told me, taking my hands. "We can start there. Machine parts, get small contracts. We can make it grow." I looked at our son sleeping in his crib, thought about the stability we had, about the risk of leaving our secure jobs. But when I saw the light in my husband's eyes, I knew I could not say no. "Let's do it," I said. "Together we can handle anything." The first few years were brutal. Arthur worked 16 hours a day in the shop. I stayed with Preston during the day, and at night I did the company books at our kitchen table. Numbers, invoices, payroll, collections. I learned everything from scratch. There were months when we did not know if we were going to be able to pay the rent on the shop. There were weeks when our dinner was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because every dollar went directly back into the business. Preston grew up seeing all this. He grew up seeing his father come home with hands stained with oil, exhausted but smiling when we landed a new contract. He grew up seeing me work until the early hours of the morning, calculating margins, calling clients, begging for payment extensions. I thought we were teaching him the value of hard work, of perseverance, of sacrificing for a dream. Now I realize that perhaps we taught him something completely different. When Preston was 10, the company finally began to stabilize. We landed a major contract with an aerospace manufacturer that needed precision parts. Arthur hired our first employee, then the second, then the third. We moved to a bigger house in the suburbs. We bought our first new car. I was finally able to leave my night job and dedicate myself completely to managing the company alongside Arthur. I told Preston, "See, honey, the effort pays off. Your dad and I built all this with our own hands." He looked at me with those dark eyes that reminded me so much of Arthur and said something I should have taken as a warning, but I missed it by many years. "Mom, there are faster ways to make money." He was 10 years old. 10 years old. And he already thought our path had been too slow, too hard, too humble. As he grew, the gap between Preston and us became more evident. He wanted brand-name clothes. We bought him essentials from the department store. He wanted lavish parties for his birthdays. We threw him simple celebrations at home with family and close friends. He was ashamed that his parents had calloused, grease-stained hands. "My friends say, you guys look like blue-collar workers," he told us once when he was 14. Arthur laughed and showed him his hands. "That is because we are blue-collar workers, son, workers who built their own business. There is no shame in that." But for Preston, there was. Huge shame. When it was time for college, we offered to send him to a good state university. We had enough savings, but he wanted a private, prestigious, expensive university. "All my friends are going there," he insisted. "I cannot go to some state school." Arthur refused. With what that tuition costs, we could expand the factory, hire more people, get better equipment. Be reasonable, Preston. My son did not speak to us for 2 weeks. In the end, we reached a compromise. He would go to the state university, but he would study business administration. That way you can help us with the company when you graduate, I said hopefully. He did not answer. He already had other plans that I could not see. In college, Preston changed completely. He hung out with the children of important executives. From families with old money, he started dressing differently, speaking differently, looking at us differently. When he came home, which was less and less frequent, he criticized everything. The outdated decor, our old cars, the simple food I cooked. Why don't you hire an interior designer? Why don't you buy a Mercedes? Why does Mom cook instead of ordering takeout? He asked with disdain. Arthur tried to reason with him. Son, we have enough money to live well, but we also have responsibilities. Employees who depend on us, contracts to fulfill, investments to make in the company. We do not spend on unnecessary luxuries, Preston scoffed. That is why you are never going to be truly rich. You do not understand how real money works. He met Courtney in his senior year. She came from a wealthy family. Her father was a partner at an investment firm. The first time he brought her home, I saw how she looked at our place with barely concealed contempt. How she wrinkled her nose when I served my special casserole. How she whispered things to Preston that made him laugh while he looked at us. At their wedding, which Courtney's parents paid for because they insisted on having it at a 5-star hotel we could not afford, I heard her mother tell a friend, "It is a shame Preston comes from such a modest family, but he is different. He has ambition." I said nothing. I smiled, hugged my son, and wished him happiness. But something cracked in my heart that day. Arthur squeezed my hand during the ceremony. "Maybe when he has his own family, he will understand what we did for him," he whispered. I wanted to believe it. God knows I wanted to believe it. But deep down, I knew we had lost our son long before. We had lost him to a world that valued appearances more than character, easy money more than honest work, status more than love. And now, 5 years after Arthur's death, that son was standing before a judge trying to take away everything his father and I had built with our own hands. The first 6 months after Arthur's death were the hardest of my life. I was not only dealing with the grief of losing the love of my life, but also the tremendous responsibility of keeping the company afloat. Every morning I woke up at 4:30, made myself a black coffee, and reviewed the day's orders before the sun came up. The employees respected me, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. Could a 61-year-old woman, without formal technical training, really keep an aerospace manufacturing company running? I asked myself that question every night before sleeping. Preston showed up at the factory 3 weeks after the funeral. He arrived in his imported car, with Courtney by his side, both dressed as if they were coming from an important corporate board meeting. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, without even saying hello. He led me into the office that had been Arthur's, the office where I now spent 14 hours a day, and closed the door. "I have been reviewing the company finances," he began, as if he had the right to do so. "The situation is not sustainable. Dad kept this running by sheer willpower, but without him, this is going to collapse. I have contacts with investors who are interested in buying the land and the equipment. We could get a good price." I felt my blood boil. "This company is not for sale. Preston, your father dedicated his life to building it, and I am going to honor that legacy." Courtney chimed in with that sweet, poisonous voice she had. "Eleanor, be realistic. You do not have the experience or the energy to run this. It is better to sell now than wait for everything to crumble and be worth nothing." I stared at her. "This conversation is over. I have work to do." Preston turned red with anger. "You are being stubborn and irrational. I am going to stop you from throwing everything Dad built into the garbage out of your stupid pride." He stormed out, slamming the door. That was the first sign that my son was not going to give up easily. Over the next few months, I started noticing strange things. Calls from old clients canceling orders without a clear explanation. We were told the company was having financial trouble. One of them told me, when I insisted on knowing the reason, that the current owner did not have the capacity to meet deadlines. I had not had a single delay. Every order went out on time, with the same quality as always. Someone was spreading rumors. I hired an accountant to audit the finances because I was starting to doubt myself. "Mrs. Vance," he told me after 2 weeks of analysis, "your company is perfectly healthy. In fact, your profit margins have improved in the last few months. I do not know who is telling you that you have problems, but they are lying. I felt relief and rage at the same time. Relief because I was not going crazy. Rage because I knew exactly who was behind this. At family gatherings, which were becoming increasingly tense, Preston started making comments about my mental health in front of other relatives. "Mom is very stressed lately," he would say with fake concern. "Sometimes she forgets things, gets confused with dates. I worry that she is alone handling so much." I would protest, but he would smile condescendingly. "Don't get mad, Mom. It is normal at your age. That is why you should seriously consider retiring." Courtney would add her poison. "We saw her the other day at the grocery store and she seemed lost. Right, babe? She didn't remember where she had left the car." It was a lie. A complete lie. But she said it with such conviction that some relatives looked at me with pity. One day, Mike called me into the office, alarmed. "Ma'am, you need to see this." He showed me an email he had received from someone claiming to be from our company's human resources department. The email instructed supervisors to prepare for an imminent change in management because the current owner would be declared incompetent. "I know you would never send something like this," Mike said. "But this went to all the supervisors. Someone is trying to create chaos." We traced the email. It had been sent from a fake account, but the IP address traced back to a coffee shop near Preston's office. It was not definitive proof, but it was enough for me. I confronted my son on the phone. "I know what you are doing, Preston. I know you are trying to sabotage me." He laughed. "Mom, you are paranoid. Maybe you do need professional help. Courtney knows a good geriatrician who could evaluate you." I hung up, shaking with fury. Things got worse. Surprise inspections started arriving at the factory. OSHA, the EPA, tax audits. Every week, it was something different. We always passed the inspections because our operation was spotless, but every visit meant lost time, added stress, nervous employees. "It is like someone is constantly reporting us," our corporate lawyer commented. "Someone who knows exactly how to create problems without there being any real violations." One afternoon, going through the company mail, I found a letter that froze my blood. It was a notification that our line of credit with the bank had been canceled. I immediately called the manager, someone Arthur and I had worked with for 15 years. "I am so sorry, Eleanor," he said uncomfortably. "We received concerning information regarding the stability of the company, and also there was a call from your son. He said you were making irresponsible financial decisions due to cognitive decline." As a direct family member, he had the right to express his concern. "And you believed him?" I asked incredulously. "Without even verifying with me?" There was silence on the other end. He presented documentation that looked legitimate. Medical reports, evaluations. "We thought we were acting in your best interest." I felt the world crumbling. "Those reports are fake. I have never been evaluated for cognitive decline. My son is lying." The manager coughed awkwardly. "Well, if that is the case, you can file a formal appeal. But the process takes time." Time I did not have. Without the line of credit, I could not buy materials for large orders. I could not expand operations. I was financially strangled. That night, alone in my house, I cried for the first time since Arthur's funeral. Not tears of sadness, but of helplessness and betrayal. My own son was systematically destroying me, and he was doing it in such a calculated, legal way that I did not know how to stop him. But then I remembered something Arthur had told me years ago, when we were facing a difficult client who tried to stiff us on a payment. "Eleanor, cruel people always underestimate those they consider weak. That is their greatest weakness. Let them underestimate you, and then show them who you really are." I wiped my tears. Preston thought he had me cornered. He thought I was just a confused old woman who would surrender to his harassment campaign. He did not know that every suspicious call, every fake email, every unjustified inspection, I was documenting everything. Dates, names, evidence. I was building a file. If my son wanted war, he would get it. But it would be a war he never saw coming. I quietly hired a lawyer specializing in corporate fraud. I showed him everything I had collected. He whistled low. "This is serious, Mrs. Vance. Your son could face criminal charges if we prove he forged medical documents and committed bank fraud." I asked him to investigate everything, but to do it quietly. I do not want him to know I am preparing yet. Let him think he is winning. Meanwhile, on the surface, I kept working 12, 14 hours a day. I kept smiling at the employees, fulfilling contracts, maintaining the impeccable quality that had been Arthur's trademark. And in secret, I was preparing my counterattack. What I did not know was that Preston was already planning his final move. The blow he thought would destroy me completely and give him everything he wanted. The forced bankruptcy petition. Everything blew up on a Wednesday afternoon. 3 months after I started systematically documenting every one of Preston's attacks. I was on the shop floor checking inventory with Mike when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, I answered distractedly. "Missus, Eleanor Vance, widow of Arthur Vance?" asked a formal voice on the other end. "I am the process server for the district court. I have to notify you that you have been sued by your son, Preston Vance, who is requesting a declaration of legal incompetence and the forced bankruptcy of your company due to mismanagement." The phone almost fell from my hands. "What?" was all I could articulate. The server continued in a monotone voice, reading legal terms I barely processed. Hearing date, courthouse, obligation to appear, consequences of failure to appear. When he hung up, I stood paralyzed, staring at the office wall where a photo of Arthur and me hung from the day we opened the factory, smiling, full of hope. Mike noticed my pale face. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I could not answer. I simply handed him the phone where I had written down the information. I watched him read, saw him go pale too. "That son of a bitch," he muttered. "Pardon my French, ma'am, but your son is a son of a bitch." I did not correct him. He was right. I immediately called my lawyer, the one who had been quietly investigating Preston's activities. "I know," he said before I could speak. "I just received a copy of the filing. It is aggressive, very aggressive." He explained that Preston had filed a suit claiming I suffered from severe cognitive decline, that I had made irresponsible financial decisions putting the company at risk, and that as the sole direct heir, he had the right and obligation to intervene to save the family assets. "And the evidence we have been collecting?" I asked with a trembling voice. "The fake emails, the fraudulent calls, the made-up medical reports?" My lawyer sighed. "All that is useful, but he presented documentation that on the surface looks legitimate. We have to prove it is fake, and that takes time. The hearing is in 2 weeks. That is very little time to build a solid defense." That night I did not sleep. I sat in my living room, surrounded by boxes of company documents, photos of 38 years of history, technical blueprints with Arthur's handwriting in the margins. Everything we had built, everything that meant something, was about to be snatched away by our own son. The next day, Preston showed up at the factory. He had not been there in months, but now he walked with the confidence of someone who already considers himself the owner of the place. "Mom," he said without a trace of emotion in his voice, "I came to make one last attempt to be reasonable. Drop your opposition to the suit, accept the medical evaluation, and I will ensure you have a dignified retirement. A monthly stipend, a small house, everything you need, but the company has to pass to my control." I looked at him without recognizing him. This man in a $3,000 suit, with Italian shoes and a Swiss watch, talking about my life as if it were a business transaction, was not the baby I had rocked in my arms. He was not the boy I had sung lullabies to. "No," I said simply. He clenched his jaw. "You are making a mistake. In 2 weeks, the judge is going to declare you incompetent anyway. Why go through the public humiliation? Because your father did not raise me to surrender to bullies," I replied. "Even if that bully is my own son." I saw a flash of something in his eyes. Guilt, pain, it disappeared so fast I might have imagined it. "Suit yourself," he said coldly. "See you in court. And Mom, prepare to lose everything." The following days were a hell of legal preparation. My lawyer worked 18 hours a day gathering evidence, preparing testimony, building our defense. But there was a problem. Preston had been meticulous. Every fraudulent action he had committed was hidden behind layers of plausible deniability. The fake emails came from anonymous accounts. The calls to clients could not be traced directly to him. The fake medical reports had signatures that looked legitimate. "It is like fighting a ghost," my lawyer admitted, frustrated. We know it was him, but proving it legally is another thing. I was not going to give up. I spent those days reviewing every document, every email, every phone call from the last few months, looking for that mistake, that piece of evidence that would definitively prove Preston's conspiracy. And then, 6 days before the hearing, something happened that would change everything. I was in my office at 11 at night, exhausted, reviewing old contracts when my phone buzzed. It was a message from a number I did not recognize. "Mrs. Vance, I am Frank, the lawyer who worked with your son on the lawsuit. I need to speak with you urgently. What Preston is doing isn't right. I have information that can help you." My heart raced. A trap? An opportunity? I decided to risk it. I replied, asking to meet at a public diner the next day. I arrived early, nervous, watching every face that walked in. Frank turned out to be a man in his 40s, looking tired and guilty. He sat across from me, and without preamble, said, "I resigned from the firm this morning. I cannot be part of what Preston is doing," he explained. "He hired me to build a legal case, but when I realized it was based on forged documents and systematic defamation, I told him I couldn't continue. He threatened me, said he would destroy my career if I didn't cooperate." He pulled a manila envelope from his briefcase. "Here is everything. Recordings of conversations where Preston admits the medical reports are fake. Emails where he instructs Courtney to call your clients, pretending to be a concerned employee. Bank transfers showing he paid someone to forge your signature on documents. Everything." I took the envelope with trembling hands. "Why are you doing this? Why help me?" Frank looked at me with sadness. "Because my mother died last year. I never had the chance to tell her how much I admired her, how much I appreciated her sacrifices. When I see what Preston is doing to you, a woman who worked her whole life to give him everything, I cannot be part of that. My conscience won't let me." That night, my lawyer and I went through every page in the envelope. It was pure gold, irrefutable evidence, admissible in court, proving every point of our defense. Preston had not just tried to take the company, he had committed fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. He could face criminal charges, but there was more. Among the documents, I found something that made me cry with rage and sadness simultaneously. A series of messages between Preston and Courtney discussing what to do with the company once they got it. "We sell the land immediately," Courtney wrote. "Liquidate the equipment. With luck, we get $2 million. We buy the penthouse in the gated community and forget about that filthy factory forever." Preston replied, "Perfect. Mom will never know the company was worth a lot more. By the time she realizes, we'll have already spent the money." It was not just greed. It was pure cruelty. He planned not only to steal the company, but to destroy it, erase Arthur's legacy, and spend the money on luxuries while I lived deceived, thinking they had saved something. I closed my eyes and felt Arthur's presence beside me. I could almost hear him whisper, "Now you have them, my love. Now show them who you are." But there was one last thing my lawyer discovered 3 days before the hearing, something even Frank did not know. While investigating the company's financial movements, he found that days before Preston filed the bankruptcy suit, I had received an official notification from the Department of Defense. They had accepted our proposal for a 5-year contract to manufacture critical components for aerospace systems. $75 million. The biggest contract in the history of our company. The notification had arrived in my email, but a physical copy had also been mailed to the company address. That copy never reached my hands. We checked the reception logs. Someone had signed for it and taken it. The signature was illegible, but the date matched the one day Preston had visited the factory in the last 6 months. He knew. He knew about the $75 million contract, and yet he filed the bankruptcy suit, alleging the company was not viable. It was not just fraud. It was economic sabotage on a massive scale. My lawyer looked at me with a mixture of awe and anger. "Mrs. Vance, when the judge sees this, Preston won't just lose the lawsuit. He could go to prison." I nodded slowly. Part of me, the mother who still lived in some corner of my heart, felt pain for what I was about to do to my son. But the woman Arthur had loved, the fighter who had built a company from scratch, knew exactly what she had to do. "Let justice be done," I said firmly. "Whatever the cost." The day of the hearing dawned cold and gray. I woke up at 4 in the morning after barely 2 hours of restless sleep. I stared at the ceiling of my bedroom, the same room I had shared with Arthur for 42 years, and felt his absence like a physical pain in my chest. "I wish you were here," I whispered to the darkness. "I wish you could see what our son has become." I got up, showered, and took out of the closet the gray dress I had worn to Arthur's funeral. It was somber, dignified, appropriate. I pulled my hair back into a simple bun. I wore no jewelry except my wedding ring. I wanted the judge to see exactly what I was, a 66-year-old woman who had worked her entire life, not a senile old lady incapable of handling her own affairs. My lawyer picked me up at 7. During the ride to the courthouse, we went over the strategy one more time. "They are going to attack first," he explained. "They will present their evidence of your alleged incompetence. Paid testimonies, fake medical reports, the whole arsenal. Let them drown in their own lies, and then we will present ours." I nodded, my stomach in knots. We arrived at the courthouse 20 minutes ahead of schedule. The building was imposing, with marble columns and hallways that echoed with every step. I had been there only once before, years ago, when Arthur and I had a contract dispute with a supplier. We had won that case. I prayed to God we would win this one too. Preston and Courtney were already there, sitting on a bench in the hallway. He wore an impeccable dark suit that probably cost more than the monthly payroll of my shop floor. Courtney wore a cream designer ensemble and heels so high I wondered how she could walk in them. When they saw me, Preston stood up with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Mom," he said loudly, loud enough for others in the hallway to hear. "I am glad you came. I know this is hard for you, but it is for the best. You'll see." He acted as if he were doing me a favor, as if destroying my life were an act of filial love. I did not answer him. I simply walked into the courtroom with my head held high. I heard Courtney whisper something to Preston, and they both laughed. That sound went through me like a knife. The courtroom filled quickly. I recognized some of my employees who had come to support me. Mike, our foreman, Norma, the accountant, others who had worked with Arthur and me for years. Their faces showed concern and loyalty. On the other side, Preston had brought some of his business friends, people I did not know, likely to give the impression he had community support. Judge Miller entered at 9 o'clock sharp. He was a man of about 55, with gray hair and a serious expression that revealed nothing. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "Court is now in session. Case number 2847. Preston Vance versus Eleanor Vance, petition for declaration of incompetence and involuntary bankruptcy." Preston's lawyer was a man I did not know, a large man with a booming voice who began his opening statement with a narrative designed to make me look like a confused, stubborn old woman. "Your Honor," he began, "we are here because a concerned son is trying to save his father's legacy from the mismanagement of a woman who, with all due respect, no longer has the mental faculties to run a complex enterprise." For the next hour, they presented their case. They brought in a supposed doctor who testified he had evaluated my behavior from a distance and detected signs of cognitive decline. They brought in an accountant who claimed the company finances showed erratic and irresponsible decisions. They even brought in a witness who claimed to have seen me confused in the grocery store, unable to remember where I had parked my car. It was all a lie. It was all theater. But they presented it with such conviction, with so much seemingly legitimate documentation, that I saw the judge taking notes with an increasingly serious expression. I felt panic starting to climb up my throat. What if he believed them? What if our evidence was not enough? Preston took the stand. Under oath, he looked at the judge with eyes feigning pain and concern. "Your Honor, I love my mother. Everything I am doing is for her own good. Since my father died, I have watched her deteriorate. She forgets important appointments, makes decisions without consulting anyone, refuses to listen to professional advice. The company my father built is on the verge of collapse because of her stubbornness." He paused, as if it pained him to continue. "I know she thinks I am betraying her. But someday, when she is in a safe place, well cared for, I hope she understands I did this out of love." I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump up and call him a liar, a manipulator, a traitor. But my lawyer squeezed my arm gently. "Wait," he whispered. "Not yet." Courtney also testified, with tears that looked real running down her perfectly made-up cheeks. She spoke of how she had seen me lost at family gatherings, how I repeated the same stories over and over, how she had found spoiled food in my kitchen because I supposedly forgot the dates. "It is painful to watch someone you love fade away like this," she said with a broken voice. "But Preston is doing the right thing, even if it is hard." Judge Miller listened to everything intently. When Preston's lawyer finished his presentation, he looked toward our table. "Does the defense wish to present its case?" My lawyer stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. And I believe what we are about to show you will completely change your perspective on this case." We started slowly, methodically. We presented real medical records from my primary care physician of the last 20 years, showing I had never been diagnosed with cognitive decline of any kind. The doctor testified via video conference. "Mrs. Vance is in excellent mental health for her age. Sharp, coherent, perfectly capable of making complex decisions." Then we presented the company's financial statements, audited by an independent firm. "The company is not only healthy," the auditor explained, "but has improved its profit margins by 18% since Mrs. Vance assumed full control. This is not the profile of incompetent management." I saw the confidence on Preston's face beginning to slowly fade. But the best was yet to come. My lawyer approached the bench with an envelope. "Your Honor, I will now present evidence that this lawsuit is not an act of filial love, but a calculated attempt at fraud and theft." He opened the envelope and began pulling out documents one by one. The recordings of Preston admitting the medical reports were fake. The emails instructing Courtney to sabotage my relationships with clients. The bank transfers to the person who forged documents. Preston's face went from confident to pale in a matter of seconds. "Your Honor," his lawyer stammered, "we do not know where this alleged evidence came from. It could be forged." My lawyer smiled. "Everything has been verified by forensic experts. We have sworn affidavits from the audio technician, who confirmed the authenticity of the recordings, from the document specialist who verified the emails, and from the bank that confirmed the transfers." And then came the moment I had been waiting for. My lawyer pulled out the last document. "Your Honor, there is one more detail the court must know. Mr. Preston Vance has filed this suit, alleging that his mother's company is bankrupt, that it is unviable, that it is on the verge of collapse." He paused dramatically. Could Mr. Vance then explain why, 3 days before filing this suit, his mother's company signed a contract with the United States Department of Defense worth $75 million? The silence in the room was absolute. Absolute. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Judge Miller looked up sharply from the documents he was reviewing. "Excuse me?" he said, his voice full of disbelief. $75 million? My lawyer nodded. "Exactly, Your Honor. A 5-year contract for the manufacture of critical aerospace components. The official notification arrived to Mrs. Vance 2 weeks ago. But, curiously, the physical copy sent to the company disappeared the same day Mr. Preston Vance made his only visit to the facility in 6 months." Judge Miller looked at Preston with an expression that could freeze hell over. "Wait a moment," he said slowly, every word loaded with authority. "This is the company that just inked the $75 million defense contract?" He looked directly at me. "Mrs. Vance, are you the owner of Precision Aerospace Components?" I nodded, my voice caught in my throat. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge whistled softly. "I need to see that contract. Right now." My lawyer approached the bench and handed Judge Miller a certified copy of the contract with the D.O.D. I watched his eyes scan the pages, watched his brow furrow deeper with every line he read. The silence in the room was so dense I could feel it pressing against my chest. Preston remained motionless in his seat, his face ashen. Courtney had her hand pressed over her mouth as if holding back a scream. "This is extraordinary," the judge murmured finally, looking up. "Mrs. Vance, you personally negotiated this contract?" I stood up on trembling legs. "Yes, Your Honor. For the last 8 months, I worked with engineers from the Department of Defense to develop component prototypes that met their exact specifications. We submitted our proposal 3 months ago. The approval arrived 2 weeks ago. The judge looked at Preston with an expression mixing disgust and astonishment. Mr. Vance, you file a lawsuit alleging your mother is incompetent to run her company. And yet, that very same company just secured one of the most lucrative government contracts in the aerospace industry. How do you explain this contradiction? Preston opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His lawyer stood up quickly. Your Honor, my client was not aware of this contract. This does not change the fact that there are legitimate concerns about the lady's mental health. The judge cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. Sit down, counselor. I think there is much more to this case than was initially presented. My lawyer seized the moment. Your Honor, with your permission, I would like to play a recording that illustrates exactly what Mr. Vance's true intentions were. The judge nodded. Proceed. Preston's voice filled the room. It was a recording of a phone conversation with Courtney, clear and unmistakable. Old Frank is getting nervous about the medical docs, Preston was saying. He says they could be considered forgery. I told him to shut up and do his job. Mom has no way to prove they're fake. By the time she realizes what we're doing, we'll already have control of the company. Courtney's voice responded. What if the judge doesn't declare incompetence? Preston laughed. Then we use Plan B. Forced bankruptcy. With all the rumors we've spread, all the contracts we've sabotaged, we can make it look like the company is in financial trouble. One way or another, we're getting that factory. There were gasps in the courtroom. I saw Mike, my foreman, clench his fists with rage. I saw Norma wiping tears from her eyes. Judge Miller had stopped taking notes and was staring at Preston with an expression of complete contempt. There is more, Your Honor, my lawyer continued. He projected a series of emails onto a screen. The first was from Preston to Courtney. Call the clients on the list. Pretend to be a concerned employee. Tell them Mom is having episodes of confusion, that there have been errors in orders. Don't use your real name. The next was from Courtney to Preston. Called 6 clients today. 3 canceled their orders. The others said they'd think about it. This is working better than we expected. Another email. This one from Preston to someone identified only as J. I need medical reports indicating cognitive decline for a 61-year-old woman. They have to look legit. Seals and doctor signatures. I'll pay you $5,000 for the full package. The response. Done. Sending them tomorrow. Make sure the payment is in cash. Judge Miller took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes, as if he could not believe what he was seeing. Anything else? He asked with a tired voice. My lawyer nodded. Yes, Your Honor. This. He projected a text message conversation between Preston and Courtney from just 3 weeks ago. Courtney wrote, Did you see your mom got a big government contract? What are we going to do? Preston replied, I already intercepted the physical copy that came to the plant. She only has the email notification. We're proceeding with the lawsuit as planned. Once we have control, that contract is gold. We can sell the company for triple what we thought. And here is the most revealing part, my lawyer continued. He projected another message from Preston to Courtney. When we get the company, we sell everything immediately. The land, the equipment, liquidate it all. With luck, we get $2 million. We buy the penthouse and forget about that filthy factory. Mom will never know the company was worth a lot more with the government contract. The silence that followed was devastating. I looked at Preston, and for the first time in this entire nightmare, I saw something in his eyes that might have been shame. But it vanished so quickly that perhaps I only imagined it. Courtney was crying now. But they were not tears of acting. They were panic tears of someone who just realized her world is about to collapse. Judge Miller stood up slowly. Everyone in the room rose as well. Mr. Vance, he said with a voice trembling with controlled anger. In my 25 years on the bench, I have seen many unpleasant cases, but rarely have I seen something as calculated, as cruel, as completely despicable as what has just been revealed in this courtroom. He looked Preston directly in the eye. You did not just try to steal from your mother. You tried to destroy her reputation, her perceived mental health, her company, her legacy, and you did it with a coldness that suggests a total absence of conscience. Preston tried to speak. Your Honor, I only. The judge held up a hand. No. You have lied enough for today. This lawsuit is dismissed immediately. Furthermore, I am ordering a criminal investigation for forgery, fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and economic sabotage. He turned to me. Mrs. Vance, I am deeply sorry you had to go through this experience. It is evident that you are a competent, capable businesswoman, completely in control of her faculties. Your company is in excellent hands. Yours. I felt tears begin to roll down my cheeks. Tears of relief, of vindication, of pain for everything I had had to endure. The judge continued. In addition, I am issuing a temporary restraining order. Mr. Vance, you cannot approach your mother, her company, or any of her employees while the criminal investigation lasts. If you do, you will be arrested immediately. Preston stood up, swaying. You can't do this. She is my mother. I have rights. The judge cut him off. You waived those rights when you decided to betray her in the vilest way possible. Bailiff, escort Mr. Vance out of my courtroom. And, Mr. Vance, I strongly suggest you hire a criminal defense attorney. You are going to need one. I watched the bailiff escort Preston toward the door. He turned to look at me one last time. There was no arrogance now, no cold, calculating smile. Just a man finally realizing he had destroyed everything that mattered out of pure greed. Mom, he started to say, but I could not hear any more. I looked away. Courtney ran after him, sobbing, her high heels clicking on the marble floor of the courtroom, the doors closed behind them. And for the first time in 6 months, I felt I could breathe completely. The days after the trial were strangely quiet. I went back to the factory expecting to feel relief, peace, maybe even joy. But what I felt was a deep, painful void. I had won the legal battle. Yes, I had exposed Preston for who he really was. I had saved the company. But I had also lost my son. And as much as I tried to convince myself that he had lost me first, a mother's pain does not understand logic. Mike found me in the office 3 days after the trial, staring out the window toward the shop floor where Arthur had spent so many hours. Mrs. Vance, he said softly, we are all very happy you won, but you don't look happy. I turned to him with a smile I knew wasn't convincing. I'm fine, Mike. Just tired. He shook his head. With all due respect, ma'am, you are not fine, and it is okay not to be fine. What your son did to you, no one should have to go through that. He was right. I wasn't fine. I slept poorly, ate worse. Every time my phone rang, part of me hoped it was Preston calling to apologize, to explain, to say it had all been a terrible mistake. But my phone remained silent. He didn't call, and I didn't know if that relieved me or shattered me even more. And then the real retaliation began. A week after the trial, my lawyer called me, his voice tense. Eleanor, I need you to come to my office immediately. Something has come up. I arrived 30 minutes later, heart racing. He showed me a series of articles that had appeared on business blogs and social media. 6-year-old businesswoman accused of manipulating judge with crocodile tears. Concerned son, victim of vengeful mother and corrupt judicial system. Justice or theater? The Vance case raises questions about generational bias in courts. I felt dizzy. Who is writing this? My lawyer pointed at the articles. These are paid posts, all appeared in the last 48 hours. Someone is spending a lot of money on a smear campaign against you. I didn't need to ask who. Preston wasn't going to give up just because he lost in court. The articles got more vicious. Anonymous comments appeared on my Facebook page, calling me a bitter old woman who poisoned her own son against his father. On the company page, fake 1-star reviews started popping up. Company mismanaged by senile owner. Terrible quality. Doesn't fulfill contracts. Don't trust this company. It's bankrupt. I had to hire an online reputation management firm to fight the avalanche of defamation. Every day was a new battle. We deleted a fake comment, and 5 more appeared. We reported a fraudulent review, and 10 new ones sprung up. It was exhausting, infinite, demoralizing. But the worst came 2 weeks after the trial. I received a call from the Department of Defense. Mrs. Vance, said the contracting officer with a formal voice, we have received concerning information about your company. Allegations of administrative instability, legal disputes, questions about your capacity to fulfill the terms of the contract. We need you to come to Washington for a formal review of your contractor status. I felt the world stop. Who provided you with that information? I asked with a trembling voice. I cannot reveal our sources, responded the officer, but the allegations are serious enough to require investigation. If you cannot dispel these concerns, the contract could be revoked. I hung up the phone, and for the first time since Arthur's funeral, I allowed myself to cry openly in the office. Not silent tears, but deep sobs that shook my whole body. Preston was trying to destroy the $75 million contract. It wasn't enough to have lost. He wanted to make sure I lost too. If he couldn't have the company, he would ensure it was worth nothing. Mike found me like that, crying over my desk. He closed the door softly and sat across from me in silence. When I could finally speak, I told him everything. I don't know if I can keep going with this, Mike, I admitted. I am so tired, so drained. Sometimes I think Preston won anyway, because even after losing in court, he managed to take away my peace, my joy, the ability to enjoy this victory. Mike looked at me with those wise eyes that had seen 30 years in the industry. Can I tell you something, Mrs. Vance? I nodded. When Mr. Vance died, everyone in this factory thought we would close in 6 months. Not because you weren't capable, but because we thought no one could fill those shoes. But you proved us wrong. You didn't just keep the company running, you made it grow. You landed the biggest contract in our history, and you did it while your own son was stabbing you in the back. He leaned forward. Mr. Vance told me something once that I never forgot. He said, Mike, Eleanor is stronger than me, and she doesn't even know it. The day she discovers it, there will be nothing that can stop her. I think that day has arrived, and I think your son knows it. That is why he is so desperate. That night, alone in my house, I went to Arthur's study. I hadn't entered there since his death. I kept the door closed because it hurt too much to see his things, to smell his cologne that still permeated his sweaters in the closet, to see his technical notes scattered on the desk exactly as he had left them. But that night I needed to be close to him. I sat in his chair and looked around. His engineering books, his tools, his photographs, and then I saw something I hadn't noticed before. In the corner of his desk, under a stack of papers, was an envelope with my name written in his handwriting. My heart stopped. With trembling hands, I opened it. My dearest Eleanor, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means I left sooner than we planned. Forgive me for leaving you alone, my love. Forgive me for not having more time with you. Tears fell onto the paper as I kept reading. I know you worry about the future of the company. I know you doubt yourself, but I need you to know something. You were always the true brains behind this business. I was good with my hands, with tools, but you were brilliant with the numbers, with strategy, with people. This company survived all these years not because of my technical skill, but because of your vision. I continued reading through the tears. I also know that Preston will disappoint you. I knew it since he was young. He has your intelligence, but not your heart. And without heart, intelligence only serves to do harm. When the time comes, when he tries to take what we built together, I want you to remember this. You owe him nothing. You gave him life, love, opportunities. If he chooses to waste them, that is his choice, not your failure. The last part of the letter read, Eleanor, love of my life, be strong, be brave, and above all, be true to who you are. Don't let anyone, not even our own son, make you forget your worth. You are extraordinary. You always were. I love you forever, Arthur. I held the letter against my chest and cried until there were no more tears left. And then, slowly, I felt something change inside me. Arthur was right. I had allowed pain and betrayal to weaken me. I had allowed Preston to steal my strength, but no more. I stood up, tucked the letter carefully into my purse, and picked up the phone. I called my lawyer. Prepare a countersuit, I said with a firm voice. I want to sue Preston for defamation, economic sabotage, and everything else we can prove, and find who is behind that social media campaign. I want names, and I want consequences. Then I called a friend who worked in public relations. I need you to tell my story, the true story. I am not going to hide while my son spreads lies. And finally, I prepared a full presentation for the Department of Defense, documenting every aspect of the company, every success, every loyal employee, Every contract fulfilled perfectly in the last 5 years. Arthur was right. I was stronger than I believed, and it was time to prove it. The presentation before the D.O.D. was scheduled for a Tuesday at 10 in the morning in Washington, D.C. I traveled the day before, accompanied by my lawyer and Mike, who insisted on coming to give testimony on factory operations. On the plane, I went over my presentation again and again. I couldn't afford mistakes. This contract wasn't just money. It was validation of everything Arthur and I had built. It was proof that I was capable, and I wasn't going to let Preston snatch it away from me. The meeting was in an imposing government building, with security guards and metal detectors. They made us wait in an austere conference room, with gray walls and a long table. 5 officers from the Department of Defense arrived, all with serious and impenetrable expressions. The lead officer, a retired colonel named Thompson, opened the meeting directly. "Mrs. Vance, we are here because we have received information questioning your ability to fulfill the terms of our contract. These are grave allegations. You have 1 hour to convince us that we should maintain this agreement." I breathed deep and began, not with numbers or charts, but with the truth. "Colonel Thompson, gentlemen, my name is Eleanor Vance, widow of Arthur Vance. I am 66 years old. My husband Arthur and I founded Precision Aerospace Components 38 years ago in our garage. He died 5 years ago, and since then, I have run this company alone." I paused. 3 weeks ago, my only son tried to take this company from me, alleging I was incompetent. He lost in court when his accusations were proven fraudulent. Now he is trying to sabotage this contract because if he can't have my company, he wants to ensure it is worth nothing. I saw surprise on the officers' faces. I continued. "But I am not here to talk about my son. I am here to talk about my company and why we deserve your trust." I opened my laptop and projected the first slide. For the next 40 minutes, I showed them everything. Every contract fulfilled in the last 5 years, every one delivered on time or early. Client testimonials on the quality of our work. Quality certifications, photos of the shop floor showing state-of-the-art equipment, videos of our employees explaining the quality control processes. Mike took the floor to explain the technical aspects. "I worked with Mr. Vance for 15 years before his death," he said with pride. "And let me tell you something, Mrs. Vance didn't just maintain the standards he set. She raised them. She invested in new technology, trained personnel, improved processes. This company is stronger now than when Mr. Vance was alive, and that is no disrespect to him. It is a testament to her extraordinary leadership." I presented audited financial statements showing consistent growth, letters of recommendation from other government contractors. I even brought a physical part we had manufactured for a previous DOD project, a part so precise the tolerances were measured in microns. "This part was manufactured under my direct supervision 2 years ago," I explained. "It passed all quality inspections with a perfect score. That is what we do. That is who we are." Colonel Thompson took the part and examined it carefully. "Impressive manufacturing," he admitted. Then he looked directly at me. "Mrs. Vance, can you explain specifically the allegations we received regarding legal disputes, administrative instability, lack of operational capacity?" I pulled out a thick folder. "I can do better than explain them. I can show you exactly where they come from." I handed them copies of the text messages between Preston and Courtney where they discussed contacting the Department of Defense to create doubt about Mom's ability to fulfill big contracts. I showed them phone records proving Preston had called the department's contracting office 3 times in the last week using a fake name. "My son is trying to destroy this contract out of revenge," I said clearly. "Not because my company is incapable, not because there are real problems, but because a judge exposed him as a fraud and now he wants to punish me. But I am not going to allow his corruption to stain the reputation my husband and I built over nearly 4 decades." There was a long silence. The officers exchanged glances. Finally, Colonel Thompson spoke. "Mrs. Vance, we need a moment to discuss this in private. Could you wait outside?" My heart was beating so hard I thought it would be heard throughout the room. We went out and waited in the hallway. 15 minutes, 20, 30. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, they called us back. Colonel Thompson was standing and, to my surprise, smiling. "Mrs. Vance, we have reviewed your entire presentation and have reached a unanimous conclusion." He paused a beat that seemed to last forever. "Not only are we going to keep the contract, we are going to expand it. Your company has demonstrated exactly the kind of excellence, integrity, and resilience we look for in our contractors. And frankly, anyone who can handle what you have handled in the last few months can handle anything we ask of them." I felt my knees go weak. Mike had to hold me by the arm. "Really?" was all I could say. The colonel nodded. "Really. And furthermore, we are going to file a formal complaint against whoever tried to interfere with our contracting processes using fraudulent information. That is a federal crime." I left that meeting feeling like I could fly. I hadn't just saved the contract. I had expanded it. I had proven to the Department of Defense, to my employees, to myself, that I was capable, that I was strong, that I deserved every ounce of success I had achieved. But there was still unfinished business with Preston. Back home, my lawyer had been busy. He filed a massive countersuit against Preston and Courtney for defamation, fraud, economic sabotage, and intentional damage to business relations. The amount we were asking for was $2 million, exactly the amount they had planned to get by selling my company. We also discovered who was behind the smear campaign on social media. Preston had hired a PR firm that, in reality, specialized in destroying online reputations. My lawyer sent cease and desist letters. The agency, realizing they were involved in potentially criminal activities, shut down all the fake accounts immediately and provided us with all of Preston's emails, giving them specific instructions. Every piece of evidence added to our case. Preston's lawyer called him 2 weeks after my triumph in Washington. "My client is willing to negotiate," he said with a defeated voice. "What do they want?" My response was simple. A full public apology, restitution of all legal costs, and that Preston and Courtney sign a permanent agreement where they waive any future claim on my company or my estate. Furthermore, if they ever defame me, my company, or my employees in any way again, the automatic fine is $500,000 per incident. The lawyer stuttered. That is very harsh. Your client tried to steal my company, destroy my reputation, and ruin my deceased husband's legacy," I replied coldly. "Consider yourself lucky I am not asking for him to go to prison, although I still could, depending on what the district attorney decides." 3 days later, I received the public apology. Preston posted it on his Facebook, LinkedIn, on all his social media. "I want to publicly apologize to my mother, Eleanor Vance, widow of Arthur Vance, for the false accusations I made against her and her company, Precision Aerospace Components. My actions were wrong, unjustified, and caused significant harm to a woman who deserved none of this. I accept full responsibility for my behavior and its consequences." It wasn't enough. Nothing would be enough to heal the pain he had caused. But it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was him admitting to the world that he had been wrong and I had been right. The criminal charges were filed by the district attorney. Preston faced up to 5 years in prison for forgery and fraud. His lawyer negotiated a plea deal: 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and a fine of $100,000. He was also banned from participating in any business involving government contracts for 10 years. His corporate career, which he had valued so much over his family, was destroyed. Companies don't hire executives with a history of fraud. Courtney left him 3 months later, taking half his assets in the divorce. I heard he had to sell his penthouse, his luxury car, everything he had valued more than his own mother. Part of me, the mother who never completely dies no matter how much you are hurt, felt pain for him. But the woman Arthur had loved, the fighter who had saved her company against all odds, knew this was justice, not revenge. Justice. It has been 2 years since that day in court. 2 years since my son tried to destroy me and ended up destroying himself. 2 years since I discovered a strength inside me I didn't even know existed. I am sitting in my office, the same office where Arthur spent so many hours dreaming of our company's future. But now the view from the window is different. Where there was once a modest workshop, there is now a modern facility of 160,000 square feet. We employ 120 people, triple what we had when Arthur was alive. The Department of Defense contract was not only fulfilled perfectly, but it led us to land 4 additional contracts. Last year, our revenue exceeded $20 million. But the numbers aren't what makes me smile every morning when I get to work. It is seeing Mike, now Vice President of Operations, training the new generation of engineers. It is seeing Norma, our accountant, proud to manage a company that now requires a full finance department. It is knowing that 120 families depend on the jobs we have created, and that each of those families sleeps soundly, knowing their source of income is solid. I used part of the profits to create something Arthur had always dreamed of, the Arthur Vance Foundation for Advanced Manufacturing Education. We award scholarships to young people from low-income families who want to study engineering. Every year, 10 students receive full tuition, internships at our company, and mentorship. The first generation of scholars graduated last month. Seeing their faces full of hope and gratitude reminded me why all this matters. At the entrance of the factory, I installed a bronze plaque. It has a photograph of Arthur with his trademark smile, his grease-stained hands, his eyes shining with pride. Beneath it reads, Arthur Vance, 1952 to 2020. Founder, visionary, beloved husband. He built with his hands, dreamed with his heart, inspired by his example. His legacy lives in every part we manufacture, in every life we touch, in every dream we make come true. Every morning, when I arrive at work, I touch that plaque gently. Good morning, my love, I whisper. And I swear sometimes I can feel his presence, proud of what we have achieved. And Preston? I haven't spoken to him in 2 years. I know from mutual acquaintances that he is working as an independent consultant, that he moved into a modest apartment, that Courtney married a more successful businessman and no longer contacts him. I know that sometimes he drives past the factory, looking at what could have been his if he had chosen love over greed. 3 months ago, I received a letter from him, the first direct communication since the court case. I opened it with trembling hands, not knowing what to expect. Mom, it began, with shaky handwriting I didn't recognize. I know I have no right to write to you. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that not a day goes by that I don't regret what I did. Not for the consequences I faced, but because I finally understand what I lost. I didn't lose a company. I lost the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. I lost my mother. The letter continued for 3 pages. He talked about therapy, about facing his greed and arrogance, about finally understanding the values Arthur and I had tried to teach him. It ended with, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect to be part of your life again. I only hope that someday you can remember me as I was as a child, before I lost myself, and that you keep that version of me in some corner of your heart. I love you, Mom. I have always loved you, even when my greed wouldn't let me see it. Preston. I cried when I read that letter. I cried for the boy he had been, for the man he had become, for the years we had lost. I haven't replied to him yet. I don't know if I ever will. Forgiveness is not something that can be forced, and the wound he left is deep. But I kept the letter in my desk drawer, next to Arthur's last letter. Maybe someday I will be ready to build that bridge. Maybe not. For now, I am at peace with the uncertainty. What I do know is this. I will not allow the pain Preston caused to define the rest of my life. I will not allow his betrayal to poison the years I have left. I have built something beautiful from the ashes of that betrayal. I have proven that a 66-year-old woman can not only survive but thrive. That age does not determine capacity. That strength does not come from muscles, but from character. Last week, a business magazine interviewed me. They asked me what my secret to success was. I told them the truth. There is no secret. Just hard work, unwavering integrity, and the absolute refusal to let anyone tell you that you are not enough. Not even when that someone is your own son. Today, as the sun sets over the factory, I watch the employees leaving the afternoon shift. They wave goodbye with smiles, making plans for the weekend, secure in the stability of their jobs. This is my true victory. Not the money, not the contracts, but knowing that I honored Arthur's legacy, that I protected what we built together, that I proved that love and hard work will always overcome greed and betrayal. I stand up and look one last time at the photograph of Arthur on my desk. "We made it, my love," I say out loud. "It wasn't easy. It wasn't what we expected. But we made it." And then, for the first time in 7 years, I feel something I thought I had lost forever. I feel peace, because I learned the most important lesson of all. The greatest inheritance we can receive is not money or property. It is the strength to face betrayal and come out the other side stronger. It is the courage to stand up for what is right, even when it means facing those we love most. It is the dignity of knowing that we live with integrity, no matter how low others around us fall. Arthur left me a company. But he left me something much more valuable. He left me the example of living with honor, and that is a legacy that no one, not even my own son, can ever take away from me. I am closing the office for the last time today. Tomorrow I start a vacation I postponed for years. I will travel to the places Arthur and I always dreamed of visiting, but never had time for. I will take his ashes with me and scatter them in the mountains he loved so much. And when I return, I will keep building. I will keep dreaming. I will keep proving that it is never too late to be strong, to be brave, to be exactly who you were meant to be. This is my story. The story of how I almost lost everything and discovered I already had everything I needed inside me.